The world is stunned by shocking news. According to Naval News and Jane's Defense Weekly, Indonesia is seriously exploring an extraordinary plan to purchase a retired aircraft carrier from Italy. This is not simply rumor or speculation. The story emerged after informal contacts between Indonesian defense officials and representatives of the Italian Navy regarding the soon-to-be-retired Giuseppe Garibaldi, a vessel that once symbolized Italy's maritime pride. Why does this matter? Because Indonesia, the world's largest archipelagic nation with more than 17,000 islands, has never operated an aircraft carrier. An aircraft carrier is not just a warship. It is the ultimate symbol of maritime dominance, a floating fortress that allows a country to project air power anywhere across the oceans. Until now, only superpowers, such as the United States, China, Britain, France, and a handful of others, have managed to operate carriers. Technically, Thailand owns one, the HTMS Chakri Narobit, but its Harrier jets were retired in 2006, leaving it to operate only helicopters. Analysts often describe it as more of a helicopter carrier than a true combat vessel. If Indonesia were to acquire the Garibaldi, Jakarta would not be the first ASEAN nation with a carrier, but it would be the first with a potentially operational aircraft carrier in the region. The chronology begins in Rome. The Italian Navy officially announced plans to retire the Giuseppe Garibaldi, a 13,000-ton light aircraft carrier commissioned in 1985. For decades, it carried AV-8B Harrier II jump jets and anti-submarine helicopters, serving as Italy's flagship. But as reported by Defense News Europe, the Garibaldi no longer meets NATO's modern operational requirements. Italy has already commissioned the larger Cavour and is preparing its navy to integrate F-35B stealth fighters. That left the Garibaldi on the chopping block, and analysts began to speculate which nation might purchase it. Indonesia's name appeared on that shortlist. Alongside Turkey and Brazil, Jakarta was mentioned as a possible buyer. For Turkey, the logic was clear. They are already developing the amphibious assault ship Anadolu. For Brazil, the interest is symbolic. They once operated carriers. But for Indonesia, the news came as a shock. Jakarta had never openly expressed intent to acquire a carrier, yet suddenly European sources hinted at discussions. Why would Indonesia even consider such a move? The answer lies in history and ambition. Since the 1960s, under President Sukarno's bold vision of a global maritime power, Indonesia dreamed of matching the great navies. But economic crises, political instability, and technological limits crushed those dreams. For decades, the Indonesian Navy focused on submarines, corvettes, and fast attack craft. Yet the symbolic allure of a carrier never truly died. Fast forward to today. President Joko Widodo's global maritime fulcrum doctrine has reignited interest in high-profile naval assets. Indonesia is modernizing its fleet with new frigates, submarines, and long-range missiles. But a carrier would be something else entirely, a dramatic leap in prestige. Owning one would signal Indonesia's ambition to be recognized not only as a regional leader, but as a maritime power of global relevance. Now let's examine the technical side. The Garibaldi measures 180 meters in length with a full load displacement of about 13,000 tons. Its deck can host around 16 aircraft, typically a mix of Harrier jump jets and helicopters. It features a ski jump ramp for short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft. However, it lacks catapults and cannot operate conventional fighters such as the F-16 or F-35C. Its defensive weapons are also limited compared to modern carriers. If Jakarta were to buy it, the ship's operational role would be constrained. Analysts suggest three possible missions. First, training, a platform for Indonesia to develop naval aviation skills, preparing future generations of pilots and deck crews. Second, command and control, a floating headquarters during joint exercises or humanitarian missions. Third, diplomatic symbolism, demonstrating Indonesia's rising status in ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific. But there is a heavy price to pay. Operating an aircraft carrier is one of the most expensive endeavors in defense. Fuel consumption is enormous. Modernization costs could exceed hundreds of millions of dollars, and the logistics tail is immense. According to The Diplomat, even the United Kingdom struggles with the massive operating costs of its two modern carriers. For Indonesia, whose defense budget is far smaller, sustaining such a vessel would be a Herculean challenge. And this is where doubts begin. Critics argue Indonesia faces more pressing priorities, securing its exclusive economic zone, deterring Chinese encroachment in the Natuna Islands, and modernizing its aging submarine fleet. In this context, buying a retired Italian carrier may look more like a vanity project than a strategic necessity. Neutral analysts have been quick to weigh in. According to The Diplomat and Asia Times, Indonesia's acquisition of a carrier would be more symbolic than strategic. The reason is clear. Southeast Asia's maritime environment is dominated by asymmetric threats, missile boats, drone swarms, coastal missile batteries, and gray zone tactics, not large-scale fleet battles. A carrier, especially an old one, might be vulnerable rather than useful. Consider this, the Garibaldi was designed in the Cold War era, when naval doctrine emphasized anti-submarine patrols and limited power projection. Today's Indo-Pacific is radically different. China is deploying carrier-killing missiles like the DF-21D. Iran has shown how cheap drones can harass billion-dollar warships. Would a second-hand Italian carrier survive in such an environment? Some experts argue Indonesia might instead invest in submarines, long-range anti-ship missiles, and unmanned surface vehicles. These assets would deliver practical deterrence at a fraction of the cost. Yet, the political dimension cannot be ignored. For Jakarta's leadership, the Garibaldi represents prestige, ambition, and diplomacy. Indonesia could use the ship not as a frontline war machine, but as a stage for regional exercises and humanitarian missions. Imagine it docking in Manila, hosting ASEAN naval summits, or carrying helicopters for disaster relief after tsunamis. In such roles, the carrier would serve Indonesia's soft power more than its hard power. What about global reactions? The United States would likely welcome the move. According to USNI News, Washington has long wanted Indonesia to step up its contributions to the Indo-Pacific security. Even an old carrier could be framed as proof of Indonesia's leadership role. However, China may see it differently. Beijing views Southeast Asia as its strategic backyard. If Indonesia parades a carrier alongside US or Japanese fleets, China could interpret it as a provocation. Even though the Garibaldi is obsolete, symbolism matters in geopolitics. A rusty carrier can still carry political weight. NATO's perspective is indifferent. For Europe, the Garibaldi is scrap metal. But within ASEAN, the psychological effect would be significant. Even though Thailand has the Chakri Narubet, its lack of combat aircraft leaves it effectively as a helicopter carrier. If Indonesia modernized the Garibaldi, it could claim to operate the only truly operational aircraft carrier in Southeast Asia. Vietnam, Malaysia, and Singapore would all be forced to reassess their strategies. This could even trigger a minor regional arms race. Yet not all outcomes are negative. Some argue that the presence of an Indonesian carrier could encourage joint training, interoperability, and disaster relief cooperation within ASEAN. Rather than destabilizing the region, it might strengthen collective security if managed transparently. Still, the key challenge remains: money. Even a light carrier costs hundreds of millions annually to run. Modernization, sensors, radar, weapons would add more. Without a major budget increase, Indonesia risks owning a floating museum, not a combat-ready ship. Ultimately, this debate boils down to ambition versus reality. Ambition: Indonesia wants recognition as a global maritime power. Reality: logistics, finances, and strategic limits hold it back. Whether the Garibaldi sails under the Indonesian flag or not, the debate itself signals Indonesia's evolving mindset, from coastal defense to blue water aspirations. The world is watching. Will Indonesia's crazy plan to buy Italy's retired carrier actually happen? Or will it remain just a dramatic headline? Only time will tell. What do you think? Should Indonesia spend billions on an old Italian carrier, or invest instead in submarines, frigates, and coastal defenses? Drop your opinions in the comment box. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next dramatic updates in global defense and geopolitics.